I want to talk to you today on the subject, Jesus, the high road leader. Let me tell you a story. In 1995, I was pastoring. I'd pastored for 25 years. I was writing books. And my publisher shared with me that my books were really going much more to the secular business community than they were to the Christian community. I had no idea that was happening. I was just writing on leadership. That wasn't intentional at all. It was a surprise to me. But the moment they told me that the secular business community they were the ones who were devouring the books, I immediately, at that very moment, felt called to cross over and leave the world that I knew as a pastor for 25 years and go into the business secular world to try to be salt and light and be able to share my faith. Now, I'm over my head. I'm way over my head. I've never been here before, and I really do not know even where to start, but I know that I have a calling, and so therefore I'm going to be obedient to that calling. So I'm asking God to give me wisdom. How do I effectively cross over? Because I'm not crossing over to the business community just to give them leadership teaching. I'm crossing over the business community to develop a relationship with them. And why I want to develop a relationship with them is I want to be able to share my faith. And I know intuitively that I have to help them so that I have credibility to share my faith, that I need to add value to where they are so that I can gain their respect and gain a relationship so that sometime I'll be able, and they'll let me, share my faith. So I'm really kind of loading up on Jesus, and I'm spending a lot of time in the Gospels, and I'm just trying to, again, say, Jesus, I'm just trying to know how you lived, and I just want to know so much about you that I represent you well. And then there was a book by Philip Yancey that came out in 1995 entitled The Jesus I Never Knew. It was an incredible book to me. In my home office, right behind my desk, I have books that have changed my life. That's one of those books. And what I've discovered is books that change your life, they have an important message for you, but what makes it so dramatic and life-changing is that the message within the book comes to you at the right time. In other words, it's like, I need this right now. So catalytic books in your life and in my life are timing books. They not only have a great message, but they come to us at the right time. I'll come back to that in a moment. After just immersing myself in Jesus, asking him how I could best represent him to a world that is not church, that does not have God on the radar screen, I began to gain wisdom, and I began to see that there was a way, and I came to the conclusion that Jesus did three things, and that's where we start right now. Are you ready? You don't want to miss this, okay? You just want to make sure that you just don't want to miss this. In fact, if the person beside you is not taking notes or is missing it, just look at them and say, you really don't want to miss this. You don't want to. And if that doesn't work, point to them. Well, you just point to them. Jesus did three things that made him so effective with the good news. Number one, he found common ground with people. Jesus never waited for people to come to him. He went to them. He established as quickly as he could be some kind of an identity so that they would look at Jesus and say to themselves, he knows me, he understands me. Common ground. So as I watched Jesus connect common ground, I realized that me, as a Christ follower and sharer of my faith, that I needed to find common ground with people, lost people. I had to go where they were, understand where they were. Paul said, I entered their world so I could see things from their perspective. That's why Paul entered their world. He said, I've got to know them well enough that I understand how they think. I need to understand how they view life and God and everything else. So that means you and I take effort. We take initiative to go where they are. There's nothing biblical about lost people coming to Christians. That's not a biblical concept at all. Now, it's wonderful when people come to church, and we love that. We love having a seeker-friendly church. We have a Christ fellowship. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. But when you really understand how to connect with lost people, it's you and I taking the initiative to go where they are. What did Jesus do? He left the heavenlies, put himself on the form of flesh. He was born in a little stable in Bethlehem. He came to us. So my first thought was that I must connect with people, that I have to always take the initiative to go where they are, to understand them, see their perspective. I am the one who goes to them. I am not the one who waits them to come to me. I take the initiative. That's what I would want for each one of you, to be salt and light, to take the initiative in your community of lost friends, to begin to be very, very keen on the fact that it begins where they are. It does not begin where I am. It does not begin where you are. It doesn't begin here in church. It begins where people are. So, number one was Jesus did three things. He found common ground with people. So, I got to go connect with people. I've got to go to them. Number two, he added value to people. He added value to others. Everywhere he went, things got better. In fact, that's why they thronged him. His message was so refreshing. It was filled with hope. It was filled with life. His ministry was one of lifting people, healing people, blessing people, adding value to people. And so when I began to understand Jesus in the Gospels, I said to myself, I not only need to connect with them and find common ground, I need to be salt and light. I need to add value to them. That's what salt and light does. Salt makes things better, light makes things brighter. In other words, wherever you and I are going, things ought to be lifting. It ought to be we ought to be uplifting people. We ought to be people that lost people look and say, wow, man, I love their life. We ought to be making them hungry for God, not angry. Christians have majored on angry. It's not your job to make people angry. It's your job and my job to make them hungry, to be like Jesus, to be salt and light. He doesn't. Don't force it. Don't force it. It's okay. My name's John. I'm your friend. We need to quit cursing the darkness, and we need to start shining the light. This is what Jesus' high road leadership is all about. He connected with people. He went to them. He added value to them. Like we're to be salt and light, he served them. That's how you add value. You have a servant's heart. And the third thing I just saw in Jesus' life as I read the Gospels continually is that he traveled the high road. And the high road, there are three roads you can travel: a high road, a middle road, and a low road. And the high road adds value to people, just like a low road takes value from people. The high road is transformational. I come into your life and I bring life to you. The middle road is transactional. I'll treat you okay if you treat me okay, but basically I'm going to treat you like you treat me. That's middle road. Low road is just absolutely a self-pitying road, which basically is all about me personally. When I finished my preparation to go into the world, to love them, to connect with them, to add value to them and serve them, to live this high road, I came to this conclusion, and I don't want you to miss it, because here we go. Fasten your seatbelts. If I will live like Jesus, people will like Jesus. Don't miss it. It's very simple. If I will live like Jesus, people will like Jesus. Now I'm going to flip it. And if I don't live like Jesus, people won't like Jesus. Understand, the only Jesus lost people ever see is you. You're the one. They draw their conclusions about your faith based on your behavior. They've never had a true picture of God. If they did, they would already know him, because when people have a true picture of God, as I've discovered over these years, they're hungry to know him because he's an amazing God. But the only picture is your picture. So if you live like Jesus, they're going to like Jesus. If you don't live like Jesus, they're not going to like Jesus. Period. That's the end of the story. So I determined, I want people who know me, but they don't know God, to want to know God because they know me. I'll repeat it because it was really good. I mean, it just was. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry, but it's just really good. I want people who know me, but they don't know God. to want to know God because they know me. The question we have to ask ourselves today is very simple. Do people want to know God because they know me? Do I make people hungry to know God? Or is my behavior so low road or middle road? They look at me and they say, if that's a Christian, I don't want it. Now, I've written 2 books on high road. I wrote a book for the secular community that's out now called High Road Leadership, and it's 12 pictures or characteristics of what a high road leader looks like. And then I took from that 8 of those 12 characteristics. Jesus has all 12, by the way. Everything I know about leadership is out of the Bible anyway. So Jesus has all of them, but I took 8 of them, and with my friend Chris Hodges, I said, you take 4, I'll take 4, and let's do a book on Jesus, the high road leader, and that's exactly what we did. And Jesus shows us in the Gospels the high road and how to live it. This is huge. Back in the 1990s, this is for old people like me, we wore a bracelet and said, what would Jesus do? Do you remember that? What would Jesus do? We kind of have it on our wrist. And, well, what would I got a decision to make? Well, what would Jesus do? Well, we're putting out a new bracelet with Jesus High Road Leader. And it doesn't ask what would Jesus do because there's no question to ask. Ours comes out and it's saying on the bracelet, do what Jesus did. I'm going to take the guesswork out of Jesus because Christians seem to be a little confused. My name is John and I'm their friend. I'm going to say, shut up and quit asking the question and start behaving like Jesus. And I'm going to give you 2 of the 8, okay? Now in the book I have all 8, but I'm going to give you 2 of the 8 today, and they're very simple. And the first one is that Jesus valued all people. And when you write that down, you take and you capitalize the word all people. Not some people, not people you like, not people you agree with. Jesus valued all people. What part of all do we not understand? And I know that. Again, all you got to do is go to the Gospels. This is going to mess you up because we're going to stay in the Scripture all day, which I find messes Christians up tremendously. John 3:16. It's on the screen. This is how much God loved the world. God loved, oh my gosh, the world. Oh, the world. He gave his son, his only son. And this is why, so that no one, wow, that means everyone, no one need to be destroyed by believing in him. Anyone, oh my gosh, anyone, gosh, can have the whole and lasting life. God didn't go to all the trouble of sending his son merely to point an accusing finger. Oh, did you see that? He didn't send his son Jesus to point an accusing finger. Boy, Christians are good at pointing accusing fingers. We're giving everybody the finger. That's not where he came. He came telling the world. He didn't come with the accusing of telling the world how bad it was. He came to help. He came to put the world right again. That's why he came. And as Christians, honestly, we've lost our way. And the reason I have Jesus High Road Leader book out for Christians, it's the first Christian book I've written for 20 years. Afraid it's going to mess my reputation up with lost people because I've always been covert. But I have to do this because we're in trouble in the Christian community. And the reason we're in trouble in the Christian community is because politically we have allowed, fasten your seatbelts, friend, we've allowed our differences to become divisions between ourselves and other people. Now let me tell you something about differences. There's nothing wrong with differences. We all have differences. I'm different than you. I have different opinions than you. I might even vote for somebody different than you. There's nothing wrong with differences. My gosh. Differences are kind of what makes us unique. I'm not anti-differences. Differences are differences. I mean, Margaret and I have been married for 55 years. We still have differences. In fact, if you don't believe in compromise, you don't even stay married long. I mean, there's things that we don't agree with. And that means she's right and I'm wrong or I'm right. Doesn't mean that at all. It just means we see things different. Are you all right? Differences, nothing wrong with differences. Relax, take a pill. You don't need to have everybody agree with you. Dear God, are you that insecure that you've got to have everybody in your boat all saying the same thing at the same time? Really? Differences are inevitable, but divisions are a choice. And when you start making choices that are unscriptural, we have problems. As Pastor Todd told us during this election season, the most important decision isn't who you vote for. By the way, get there and vote. Vote for your choice. Do that. We all want to vote. I'm a citizen. I vote. The most important decision is not who you vote for. The most important decision is how you behave. Here's what Jesus said. Oh my gosh. Here comes Jesus again. Going to mess us up. Jesus said, in the same way I loved you, you love one another. This is how, oh my. This is how everyone will recognize that you're my disciples. How do people recognize that you're a Christian? When they see the love you have for each other. Yesterday afternoon, Tom and I were talking, Pastor Tom, and he said, let me give you my favorite verse, and he gave me this verse. I give it to you. It's Jesus. Jesus said, live your life so attractive that people who are drawn to you will be drawn, or people who are drawn to you so that you can lead them to me. In other words, live your life so attractive that when they're drawn to you, they're drawn to me. And it was our pastor Todd. Margaret and I were at the Jupiter campus a few months ago, and I'm writing the book Jesus High Road Leader, and he gave us these 3 points, and I just repeat them. You'll remember them if you were there. You'll remember them. But our pastor Todd said, we're not only citizens of a country, we're citizens of heaven. Don't get them confused. So I know you're a citizen, God bless America. I know we are. But we're also citizens of heaven. And what did Paul say? He said, their mind is set on earthly things, but our citizenship is in heaven. We're only passing through this world. This is a very brief world, folks. We got it. Number 2 taught us that we're not just citizens of heaven, we're ambassadors of Christ. And when you're isn't that good? And if you're an ambassador, the first thing you know is you don't speak your own opinion. You have no business speaking your own opinion. You speak the opinion of the leader of the country. You're an ambassador. In other words, you represent Jesus. You don't represent you. When you're talking to people, I'm always representing who Jesus is, not who John Maxwell is. And what did Paul say our message is? As ambassadors of heaven, of Jesus. He said, we are committed to the message of reconciliation. In other words, we are to bring people together. That's why on my High Road Leadership book, I have a subtitle, Bringing People Together in a World That Divides. That's an important role, that ambassador role. And then we're not only ambassadors, but we're chosen to do a priestly work. And in this priestly work, what are we doing? We're bringing people to Him. This is huge. In fact, look what he said. I'm jumping into about the middle part of what Peter was talking about. He said, live an exemplary life in your neighborhood so that your actions will refute their prejudices. Then they'll be won over to God's side and be there to join the celebration when He arrives. In other words, when you and I represent Him right and we love everybody unconditionally and value people because of who they are, not because they agree with us. We just value people, and we value people because God values people. Once we do that, He said, they'll be won over to Christ. You see, our role as Christians is to help people connect with God. And when we walk the high road, we will see people that we disagree with in a different light. Do not miss this. You won't see people in the light of your own opinions or your own values. You'll see people in the light of how Jesus sees people. C.S. Lewis said, there are no ordinary people. We have never talked to a mere mortal. It is immortals whom we joke with, work with, marry, snub, and exploit. Don't ever miss the value of people. And how important is it to value in everybody? When Jesus was asked, what's the greatest commandment? What did He say? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all of your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like this, love your neighbor as yourself. It's very simple, in case you didn't pick that up. Love God, love others, End of story. When Jesus was on earth, he saw more in people than their past. He was able to look beyond their past. He saw Matthew, a tax collector that was despised by religious people. And he said, hey, Matt, come on, I want you to be one of my disciples. That shook the church up. He saw Matthew not as what he was or in the past. He saw him as he could be. And when the people pressed him, said, why do you eat with sinners? He said, because I've come for lost people. I've come to seek and save those which are lost. I'm a doctor. I came for sick people. I'm a shepherd. I look for lost sheep. By the way, he not only, when he looked at Matthew, saw more than Matthew's past. Are you not glad when God saw you, he looked beyond your past and my past? That's an IQ question. Jesus saw more in people than their status. So when an attorney came to Jesus and who is my neighbor, Jesus thought he would really mess him up. And he told him his neighbor was someone that he despised, a Samaritan. He didn't talk about his neighborhood, the guy across the street. He said, let me tell you who your neighbor is. It's a Samaritan. Now, at the moment he said Samaritan, we got all kind of problems because Jewish people, they politically disagreed, they spiritually disagreed. These were racial enemies. And he said, your neighbor is your Samaritan. They tells the story of the Good Samaritan and how the people that the attorney would have liked, the priest and the Levite, didn't even help the guy that was hurting, but a guy that he really didn't like at all stopped and helped the guy that was hurting and put him on his donkey and put him in some hospital care and said, I'll come back in a few days and I'll take care of him. Now, don't miss this. Your neighbor is not just the person that you sit beside at your outdoor barbecue. Your neighbor are people that are just totally different than you. Totally opposite of you. And Jesus said, I want you to know that's your neighbor. And I want you to know you're to love that neighbor. This is huge. That's why I tell people all the time, if I see you as hurting, I'll help you. If I see you as broken, I'll fix you. Well, those are wonderful things. What does John do? He sees somebody hurting, he helps them. Sees somebody broken, he fixes them. Kind of makes me look good, doesn't it? But if I see you as valuable, I'll serve you. That's a whole different level of love. When we serve people. You know, Jesus saw more in people than their sin. So here's the woman caught in adultery. Here come the religious people, praying her in front of Jesus, said, let's throw some stones today. And of course, Jesus looks at them and he knows every one of those people have sin in their life and they have no business throwing rocks. So he begins to reveal to them their sins and they slip. See, the religious people wanted to write her off. Doesn't that sound kind of familiar today? We're just wanting to write people off. Oh, we just write people, well, I mean, they're on the wrong side. Oh my God, we want to write people off. Quit writing people. You have no business writing people off. In fact, you and I should be written off. What makes you think you're so amazing that you are in the middle of God's favor and everybody's on the outside? God so loved the world. You see, religious people want to write people off and Jesus wants to write people in. There's a difference between writing them in and writing them off. I've read the story of the pit before, haven't I? A man fell in the pit and a subjective person came along and said, I feel for you down there. An objective person came along and said, it's logical somebody would fall in that pit. A Christian scientist came along and said, you only think you're in a pit. A Pharisee said only bad people fall in the pit. A news reporter wanted an exclusive story on the pit. A fundamentalist said, you deserve your pit. A realist said, no, that's a pit. The IRS agent asked if he was paying taxes on the pit. They sure would. County inspector asked if he had a permit to dig the pit. An evasive person avoided the subject of the pit altogether. A self-pitying person said, you haven't seen anything till you've seen my pit. Charismatic said, just confess you're not in that pit. Optimist said things could be worse. Pessimist said things will get worse. And Jesus, seeing the man in the pit, took him by the hand. And he lifted him out of the pit. This is huge. This is huge. I so fell in love when I was writing this book with the characteristics of Jesus in the Gospels that one day I wrote a poem. I write poetry to my grandchildren. In fact, on their birthday, every birthday, if I'm with them, I read the poem to them. But if I'm not with them, I send them the poem on their birthday about 3:30 in the morning. So when they wake up, they know that when they know the first thing they look for when they turn whatever age is to turn on the phone. They know that they'll have a poem from Papa. So I like to write poetry. I don't write a lot of it. I'm not that good at it, but I like to write it. And I was so inspired by Jesus and who he was and how he walked the high road. I wrote this poem, and it's in the book, Jesus High Road Leader. And in fact, I'm just waiting. It's because it's going to be picked up. Some musician's going to pick this little sucker up. And I've already talked to some of them and planted the idea, just in case they're not thinking well. You just got to help people. You know how that works. But it's called High Road Leader in Sandals of Grace. And every line is descriptive of another characteristic of a high road leader that's in Jesus' life. And it just simply says, high road leader in sandals of grace, acknowledging humanness, tears on his face, doing what's right with motives and so pure, giving more than he took, love to assure, gathering people the good news to hear, placing them first. They came far and near. Forgiving so freely, he didn't keep score. Valuing all people, gave him instant rapport, and living a life so authentic and real, speaking words of great hope, had such an appeal. Sharing his message with love on his face, high road leader in sandals of grace. That's our Jesus. That's our Jesus right there. That's my Jesus. That's the Jesus not only I know, that's the Jesus I love, and that's the Jesus I want to be like. I want to be like him. Let me just give you one more high road characteristic of Jesus. He not only valued all people, but he didn't keep score. Okay, fasten your seatbelts. Keeping score is good for games. It's not good for life. And I know people who keep score and are cheated out of fulfillment in life because someone owes them something. He didn't keep score. Now, he had a disciple that kept score all the time. His name was Peter. Pete was a big scorekeeper. In fact, I can show you a dozen times in the Gospels where Peter's keeping score. He came to Jesus. Came to Jesus one time and said, now, I've been thinking about this, Jesus. How many times should you forgive someone? And he suggested 7, which was a big number for Pete. It was kind of like 7 and you're out. That's it, baby. 7, it's over. But he kind of felt a little spiritual. I know he felt spiritual because he came to Jesus about it, and he thought, I'm going to really impress Jesus because I got a high number on 7. And of course, Jesus looked at him. He said, not 7, but 77 times. And Pete says, oh, I wish I wouldn't have brought up the subject. You see, scorekeepers, when they're around people who don't keep score, realize what a low road they travel. So let's go. There's so many stories and so many illustrations on this, but let's go to the Last Supper, what we know, when Jesus brought his disciples together in that last hour to have one final meal with them before Gethsemane and the trial and the cross and everything that we know that led after that. So when he gets his disciples together, the Bible says he took off his robe and he took a basin, filled it with water, and he wanted to wash his disciples' feet. So like Jesus, a loving, serving leader. And he came to Peter with his water basin, and Peter realized that Jesus was going to wash his feet. Peter said, oh, no, excuse me, Jesus, you don't wash my feet. Now, the only reason The Peter said, Jesus, you don't wash my feet, is because Peter looked at Jesus as higher than him. You see, scorekeepers are positional. So he looked at Jesus as, well, you're higher than me, and so I couldn't let somebody higher than me wash my feet. And then Peter's looking around at the other disciples, and he said, what about these other guys? See, Peter wanted his feet washed. Scorekeepers are particular who wash their feet because they're positional. Now, Jesus had to help Peter. He said, no, let me explain something to you, Peter. You have a pecking order because you're a scorekeeper. And you're looking around the room and you're saying, I'm better than the other disciples, so any of them can wash my feet, but you're not better than me, so you're saying I can't wash feet. And he said, I just want you to know that if I don't really wash your feet, you're not going to have a part of my kingdom. And of course, Peter was an extremist and extravagant. He said, well, then give me a whole bath. And Jesus said, that's not necessary either. I got a wash basin, not a wash tub, so we could do it. Now, by the way, this is very interesting. There's only twice in the Gospels that a basin of water is mentioned. One with Pilate and one with Jesus. And if you'll remember, Pilate, when the crowd was pressing him to crucify Jesus, he was so mixed up emotionally and messed up because he knew that Jesus was not guilty, and he wanted to really release him, but he could hear the crowd, and he wanted to kind of please the crowd. So what's he do? He said, bring a basin of water, and he washed his hands of the guilt or responsibility of what he was about to say about Jesus. In other words, Pilate, when he picked up the basin of water, he used it only thinking of himself. And Jesus, when he picked up the basin of water, he used it only thinking of others. Same basin, same water. Pilate, low road. Jesus, high road. So we're at the Last Supper. So we've now washed the feet. Peter's through with that keeping score. And then Jesus said, by the way, by the evening, by the time it's over, you guys are going to deny me. Well, here comes Pete again. Well, Jesus, I can't speak for these other guys. Dear God, we know they're kind of in and out. But he said, you can count on me. I won't leave you. I'm not going to forsake you. I'm going to be right there. Just, hey, I'm the man. I am the man. Well, he wasn't the man. As soon as he was approached in the garden about having a relationship with Jesus, he started lying, he started cursing, he started telling him, he's not the man at all. He in fact, 3 times almost repeated, I don't know him, it's not me, and he's cussing away, and the cock crows, which reminds Peter of what he did. Now, here's what I do not want you to miss, because this begins to be absolutely huge. Peter, who always kept score. Let me tell you something. If you keep score, you'll always lose because you'll never measure up yourself. Oh my gosh. You're going to lose because you'll never measure up. Well, Peter doesn't measure up now. He's ashamed of himself. He's totally lost. And he leaves. And by the way, when he says he leaves, he leaves. He's going. Basically what he's going to do is he's going to say, I no longer can be a disciple of Christ. I've disqualified myself. I think I'll go back to the lake where I go fishing because I know fishing. I'm a good fisherman. And off he goes. Now, what I want you to catch is this. Jesus doesn't keep score. Peter does. Peter is fishing and disqualified himself because he kept score. But Jesus didn't disqualify him. In fact, when he resurrected from the dead, the messenger, when it talked to the women who came to the tomb, the messenger said, tell his disciples that he's risen. And then the messenger said something interesting. Tell his disciples and Peter. Jesus wanted to make sure that Peter realized that he didn't lose his discipleship because he did something wrong. He wanted him to realize that he still loved him. Tell the disciples, and because Peter has disqualified himself, and by the way, when you keep score, you're disqualifying yourself all the time because you disqualify others. And when you disqualify the others, it is only a matter of time till it comes back right to you. And you look at it and say, what happened? What happened is you keep score. That's not high road leadership. That's not what Jesus wants. So what does Jesus do? Jesus, who doesn't keep score, he goes to the lake. Of course he goes to the lake. He's not counting out who wins. He's going to Peter because he loves Peter. And then they have this discourse in John that's just incredible. And he asked Peter, he said, Peter, he said, let me ask you a question. Do you love me? Now, there are three words for love, but the word that Jesus loved, do you love me, is the highest divine quality of love. It's agape. It's the highest quality of love that you could have. It's a special kind of love. It's high road leadership love. And he said, Peter, do you love me? And Peter knows that he can't answer yes to that question because he just denied the Lord and messed up his whole life, and he's been keeping score. And so when he says, do you agape love me, Peter can't say, I agape love you. The best he can do is he can say, I phileo love you, which is a brotherly love. I love you like a brother. It's not a divine love. I've already messed up the divine love stuff. I've already told you what I would do and I didn't do it. And now I'm back fishing and my whole life is kind of upside down. So I can't agape love you, but I can phileo love you. And Jesus looks at him the second time and he's asking him again, but Peter, do you agape love me? Lord, you know what I did, Lord. You know what I did. I phileo love you. Now here's what's incredible, and I don't want you to miss it. The third time, Jesus understands Peter cannot measure up. He's been keeping score. He's never going to measure up. And Jesus says, it's okay. I will come to where Peter is. I won't ask Peter to come where I am. And Jesus looks at Peter the third time and says, do you phileo love me? And the moment he said, do you phileo? Peter says, yes, Lord, I love you. You know I love you. And all of a sudden, Peter understands what it's like to be loved unconditionally by a God and not have somebody keeping score and not putting added weight on what you've done or where you've been and who you are and what you're going. He looks at him. Do not miss this message. Do not miss this. This is Jesus, the high road leader. And that's how much he loves you. And that's how much he loves me. And I have fallen in love with high road leader behavior because it sets us apart. It makes us a beautiful, peculiar people, not like the culture that we live in. God help us. We do not need to stoop to where they are because they're hungry to have something higher and better than them. And the only thing that will make them hungry is a life that turns the other cheek and walks the second mile. This is the only thing that will change. Listen, my hope is not based in Washington, D.C. My hope is based in Jesus. Only Jesus. Only Jesus. On Christ, the solid rock I stand. All other ground, it's sinking sand. All other ground is sinking sand. And when you and I say, I am going to be a high road leader like Jesus, it changes us. And then that's what changes the world. And that's what Jesus wants in your life. That's what he wants in my life. God bless you.